An oligopoly, put simply, is when there are a small number of large firms that dominate a market. Though there are some advantages to oligopolies, tacit collusion among the firms is a major problem. One way that firms compete is on the basis of price. The simple idea being that a lower price will yield greater demand. However, though the best situation for any one particular firm, in many circumstances, is that they are offering the best price, it is likely that other firms will lower their price to match. If another firm lowers their price, then this process will repeat until firms are selling products at a lower price than they would like. In fact, firms would obviously like to sell their products at the highest price they can. This leads to the situation that it would be better for firms if each and every firm didn't lower their price, so long as they operate in a market where the market as a whole has an inelastic price elasticity of demand. This is to say that changes in price do not greatly affect demand, which is the case for many necessities and goods that we consume on a habitual basis, such as cigarettes and tea. In an oligopoly, the small number of firms allows for the cooperation needed to keep a high price. Each firm knows that their actions are being watched very closely, and in such markets, prices tend to rise or fall in unison, as can be seen with oil and gas companies in the UK. This creates problems for the consumer in terms of uncompetitive prices. Collusion, that is the aforementioned cooperation, is illegal, but very hard to prove when firms make agreements with winks and nudges. So what can be done? Here are my thoughts. Given that you only need one firm to break the equilibrium, governments could create incentives to do so. A special kind of company could be created by the government from scratch or from an existing company, and the government would have the resources to break the high barriers to entry present in oligopolistic markets. This new company would be run by shareholders, a board of directors, and executive management, just like any other private company. Profit will be sought like in any other company, incentives that encourage efficiency will persist, and competition with private firms will remain. The difference is that government can, by imposing on this company a price, taxing profits above a certain amount, and otherwise imposing incentives or rules to set a low price with low marginal profits, break the market equilibrium of a normal oligopoly. To create a loose analogy, imagine the Bank of England. It is an institution that is considered independent, but is given mandates and rules by the government, such as the inflation target. Why would any investor be willing to put money in a venture with such limited returns? What can compensate such low profitability? Low risk is the answer. Indeed, some German bonds have been auctioned at negative yields because of their low-risk nature. In exchange for such limitations on profit and price, the government can provide an explicit state guarantee, much like the implicit backing governments have had with banks. The backing could be extended to investors in the form of compensating losses from falls in share price minus dividends gained, which would mean that an investor only stands to make no money in the worst-case scenario. Not a desirable outcome, especially if there is high inflation, but not disastrous either. This may also lead to the exit of old investors when the company performs badly, and an influx of new investors buying shares at a low price in the hope of turning the company around to produce capital gains. Profit incentives can be put in place to make the company productively efficient, such as granting the entirety of profit made on the basis of having lower costs than competitors. For example, let's say that we create such a company in the oil and gas market, and that there is a given price of oil, and this special company lowered its operating costs whilst its competitors did not. The extra profit that the company receives will be theirs for the keeping. Furthermore, the traditional incentive to combat complacency in private companies, that is, the risk of failure, will be emulated by feeble returns if the company performs badly, which would probably represent the real degradation of investors' wealth. Though the company can't fail, poor performance would represent an opportunity cost for investors, whose money could be put to a more fruitful investment, prompting changes described before, with either new investors coming in, or old investors turning the company around. Especially in today's changing attitudes, dissatisfied shareholders will prompt change of management, and therefore the parts of the company that require incentives, that is the people working in it, will still have a similar degree of incentivization present in other private companies. The fact that incentives remain in place, even if to a lesser degree than a normal private company, would likely make the sector involved more efficient than traditional nationalization of an industry, where competition and private profit is eliminated. In this proposed system, competition remains and profit incentives encourage efficiency. Another advantage is that putting control of the company in the hands of private investors will keep the company out of direct political control, which can sometimes use companies for political gain that is not in the economic interest of the nation. See Argentina's President, Cristina Fernandez, whose nationalization of oil and gas is for the purposes of filling the treasury's coffers, rather than anything else. Also the political involvement in the Spanish Cajas, which contributed to their bankruptcy and the subsequent crisis. If this policy is shown to be successful in one market, then simply the threat of setting it up may be possible to break the high prices of other oligopolies. There are limitations to this concept, of course. Firstly, though I give a few examples and ideas, the mechanisms of introducing incentives are ill-developed and would need more explanation than is possible in a video. Secondly, putting such price-focused competition in an oligopolistic market may eliminate the fierce non-price competition that has led to great innovation and benefit to the consumer, with supernormal profits being put into developing the bigger, better, faster products that many consumers demand. Apple released widely popular new products, such as the iPhone and iPad, and now, as a proud owner of a Galaxy Note 2, I see that Samsung is fiercely striking back to deliver to the consumer the next innovation that they demand. It may be the case that this idea would only be desirable in markets that supply commodities in consumable form, such as the oil and gas industry, where innovation is more limited. Thirdly, such a policy will inevitably cost the government a great deal of money. It is unavoidable that the government will have to make good on its end of the bargain sooner or later. However, if the policy is successful, then the gains to the economy could be huge, and it may be a more cost-effective way of dealing with high prices than subsidizing a potentially inefficient nationalized industry or giving subsidies to private companies that dominate a market for them to lower their price. After all, only one company is receiving a state guarantee. Lastly, the threat of drastically reducing the profits of private companies will disincentivize them to make investments that would allow them to supply greater quantities to the country implementing the policy, since they would incur a great opportunity cost if they could be focusing the supply of their product elsewhere. Some companies may be convinced to leave altogether. However, I do not think this is likely as long as the new, more competitive price set by the system still allows for some of the more productively efficient private companies to make normal profits and to always produce an acceptable return on investments. In a truly free market, rules are made to be broken. What do you think?